All right, and we're live. Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 61 of the Multiverse Show with your host, Anchorman V2, and we got a great show lined up for you guys. But real quick, sad moment for George Romero. He passed away yesterday, 77. Just sad loss for the horror and film industry, just tragic. Anyway, moving right along, we got a really nice panel lined up for you guys today. But first, let's go through our intros for our co-hosts this evening. The next succession of co-hosts, we got Nick.
What's going on, guys? Glad to be back on the show on a Monday again.
And we got James Wilson.
I can't believe you missed an opportunity to make an undead joke.
I know, man. I was trying to think of something later, but we're going to get into that. Hopefully, I'll come up with something a little bit later. And we got Mike.
Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Mike from the Inner Circle at TICGN.com. And thank you all once again for joining us for another wonderful episode of the Multiverse Show.
I'm sorry, I cut you off there, James. What was that? It was your intro time.
No, I was just saying hi. Hi.
We have our guest for the evening. This has been one I was very surprised we actually pulled off. We got Ian Dallas from Giant Sparrow.
Woo!
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here.
We used to have sound effects, and I feel empty without them.
All right, so we got a really cool show lined up. First of all, Ian, I'm just glad you were able to come on the show with us. James was trying to put this up behind the scenes, and when he told me, so we got Ian Dallas, so I was shooting for an art director.
Yeah, I mean, nothing against you, Ian, but I contacted Chris Bell. I contacted Giant Sparrow, and then I said, hey, can we talk to Chris? And then they came back with going, hey, do you want to talk to the head of the company? And I went,
Yeah,
sure.
Well, I sit next to Chris. Yeah.
Excited. We finally got some questions to ask. So real quick, I hate to waste an opportunity. So we're going to do a quick little interview here. We just had a couple questions for you, just some basic stuff. So just briefly, Ian, just kind of give us your background. Like, what were you doing before you were a developer, and what kind of made you become a game developer?
Before I was a developer, I was a comedy writer, and I started off initially at The Onion, writing parody news, and then worked in television for various like sitcoms and animated shows, and then went to grad school for game design. And then this prototype that I was making in grad school of exploring this white world, throwing paint everywhere, ended up getting a development deal with Sony. And then we made our first game, The Unfinished Swan, that came out in 2012 for PlayStation. And then for the last 4.5 years, we've been working on our new game, What Remains of Edith Finch, which just came out in April for PS4 and PC, and then comes out on Wednesday of this week for Xbox.
Oh wow! I did not know you were in TV. That's what made the jump to game design. It just seems really kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah, well, I've always been interested in surprise, like things that shake up people's view of the world, and I think really interesting comedy like Monty Python or SNL, does that kind of thing. And I'd always expected that I'd become a writer for games. Like in college, my plan had been to write for TV or movies, since that was kind of more of an established thing. And then after a few years, to move into video games, figuring that video games would sort of mature as a medium. And then, I had this sort of realization as I started looking at how games are actually made, that game writers don't really have much to do with the overall conception of the game. They're called in kind of at the end to sort of polish things up and essentially like put lipstick on a pig. So, kind of shifted to thinking about, maybe creating the games from an earlier step before the writing. And at that point, I like taught myself how to program and was interested in making these little prototypes. And so then I ended up at USC in the grad school for studying game design.
You mentioned Monty Python. Is that why Terry Gilliam is the voice of the king in Unfinished Swan?
Yeah, I mean that is That's a big part, but actually the main reason is because Terry Gilliam directed a film called Time Bandits. That was one of the key pieces of inspiration, as well as things like Brazil and 12 Monkeys. I just really like Terry Gilliam's work and wanted to have him involved here. We actually tried on this game to get Neil Gaiman to do the narration for Lewis's story, but he, at the time that we contacted him, they were like, "Oh yeah, he's not accepting any new, opportunities for the next 12 months." So we were a little late.
All right, Mike, I think the next one.
Yep. So your first game as a studio was Unfinished Swan, which I actually played really recently and really have enjoyed so far. I really want to know what was your inspiration behind the game? Like, there's so many different styles that go into the game. I found the game such an art piece with all the different colors and all. Just how the game builds is just absolutely beautiful. So I kind of want to know how you went about doing that.
Yeah, I mean, like both of our games really started from the same place, which is just a feeling. And in the case of the Unfinished Swan, the feeling was playing the prototype. Initially it started off as just a straight mechanic of, oh, what if you're in a white world throwing these paintballs around to explore? And then, once we had that working, there's just a lot of time of spent thinking about what should this become? Like, what does it kind of feel like to play? And, I think early on, there was some thought, certainly people who'd seen the video, that expected it would be something like Portal, that was like a kind of series of investigations into this mechanic and how it developed. And it just wasn't something I was interested in making. I think for me, when I played the prototype, what was interesting was that sense of the unknown and the kind of sense of wonder that you get from a totally white landscape of kind of infinite possibilities. And so, I looked at trying to find references that felt like they kind of evoked that similar sense of kind of exploration. And I'd say the biggest inspirations were Alice in Wonderland and the children's literature in general, but especially Chris Van Allsburg's books like Jumanji and all of his books basically that have this kind of painterly quality. And just, the feeling of really reading a children's book was what inspired the Unfinished Swan.
Yeah, like when I was playing through the game, I loved how you guys associated the collectibles in the game were part of the story, and the collectibles enhanced the experience. And how one of the most beautiful moments in that game for me was when you walk out and you see the maze and the castle for the first time. I thought that was such a beautiful set piece, and it was probably one of my favorite visual pieces I've actually seen in a video game in quite a few years.
Thanks. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that moment, because I think for me that's the definitive moment of awe that we've been able to achieve as a studio, which we kind of stumbled into by accident. But it's the sense of awe is a really delicate emotion. But I think there are a few things that we've discovered that actually kind of make that more likely to happen. Particularly going from kind of a small enclosed space to something that is vast and kind of unusual but beautiful at the same time. And so that moment, where you're in the king's workshop, this very tight space, going up these stairs, and you see the labyrinth for the first time, really inspired the first time that players see the Finch house, actually, in What Remains of Edith Finch, where you're kind of walking through this kind of dense forest, and then you step out, and then you see this giant crazy house in the background. So there's, even though the games are very different in a lot of respects, there's kind of a similar kind of heartbeat that they both share.
Yeah, that's really cool.
All right, Mike.
No further questions?
All right, so last week, and like you said earlier in the show, you guys announced What Remains of Edith Finch coming to the Xbox One, which, as somebody that primarily games on Xbox, I'm really, really looking forward to. So it's kind of a two-part question for me. So number one, what was it like working with Microsoft on that project? And are you excited about making your debut on Xbox?
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft was really pretty chill about everything. I think it helps that we had already basically finished the game. we had gone through a lot of teething pains on the PlayStation 4, with regards to things like, saving or when you're allowed to do or throw this prompt up or whatever. Just a lot of like annoying little edge cases that come up at the end of the game. So by the time we were working with Microsoft, we already had a finished PS4 version. So yeah, I think there were a few things that, just like really small niggly things like about like, oh, when do you show the player, I can't remember what they call it on Xbox, like the username, and like, oh, like for a while we were going to have to show it in the menu, which would have been really difficult for us because of the way that the text works in the game to support. And they were really, very, very gentle and kind about waiving things where it made sense to waive them. And in terms of how I feel about coming out on a new platform, super excited. Really happy that this game is going to come out to a totally new group of players that hopefully will find it and be astonished by it. And it's really kind of surprising to me. Obviously, as a game developer, video games are a huge part of my life. So I kind of have every system very shortly after they come out. But in the real world, like regular people who do other things than play video games, they're like really attached to like, I'm a Nintendo person or I'm a Xbox person, and it's great that we can make the game available for people in like whatever their preferred ecosystem is.
Awesome.
It's fantastic. I would like to ask you some. It's a bit of an interesting question because I like to think. Sorry, I just gotta say, when I record these, it's 1 a.m., so I am very tired right now.
Right.
And I can't get my words
out.
out.
You sound tired and British.
That is my entire personality in 3 words, so well done.
Yeah. Actually, I had an interview with somebody at 8 a.m. recently, and it turned out he was in Seattle, and we were both a little confused. Like, why was it scheduled for 8 a.m.? I assumed you were British.
Oh, wow.
Not British.
Okay. So I want to talk about the line you toe between storytelling and gameplay, specifically in Edith Finch, and specifically with the Gregory, Lewis, and Barbara segments.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to go into spoilers because I don't want those spoilers for anyone who hasn't played it. Because to me, they're the highlights of the game. Because so in regards to Lewis's one, you have the monotony and you have the storytelling. How did you manage to, first of all, come up with something that is genuinely one of the most brilliant pieces of game design I've experienced in the past few years? And where do you toe that line of, this is a game, this is a story that we're telling?
So I'll answer the first question in the beginning. This is a very, very easy answer. We stole it. That story is actually based on a 1912 short story by a British author named Lord Dunsany. And it's about a man who goes to business in London selling things and kind of gradually gets lost in his own imagination. There's no cannery. There's a lot of things that we changed about it to make it a game. But the initial idea, we just found already kind of fully formed in some respects. So that made that process a little bit easier, and we could focus on just like, how do we implement this, like not only as a game, but also like what feels like it would be the most appropriate for the world that we've created. And I think for us, it's usually, Lewis's story is a little unusual in that respect because it started from more of like a story with a plot and a character, but generally speaking, our stories in this game begin as kind of mechanics or as emotions or feelings, like this sort of a nugget of something that we're interested in exploring, as opposed to like a character that we're interested in or something. And the stories usually come very late. I think Gregory's story is a pretty good example of that, where we knew that we wanted to have a story from a baby's perspective, and we wanted to have this frog in a bathtub. But in terms of like what the player would be hearing, and when you think about like story in the sense of plot and character and dialogue and all that, that really only came in at the end, or really gelled at the end, I guess I should say. We had versions of stories that just didn't really fit. And I think for us, the hardest part is always, what is the player doing? what is it that your controls are mapped to? What do you care about? What are you kind of afraid will happen? What are you trying to make happen? And for us, we wait until we have something that's like a satisfying piece of interaction before worrying about any kind of story, like an overt kind of dialogue and character. So yeah, like in Lewis's story, we tried a bunch of different, really crazy, overly complicated kind of boring jobs that Lewis could have, like working at a telephone switchboard and making food. I think in a kitchen was one of the ideas, and we just sort of kind of coalesced into the idea of eventually chopping fish, which seemed like a good fit for we were trying to make a game about the sublime horror of nature, and chopping fish seemed like a good way to kind of balance that against something that felt mundane. So I don't know if that helps answer that. In Barbara, I guess I haven't really talked at all about Barbara's story. That was I don't even remember how that came about. That was initially kind of inspired by the John Carpenter film Halloween, a little bit of George Romero as well in there. I mean, Barbara's name, right, is totally from
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Yeah, it's 100, like straight up George Romero. And
oh wow,
yeah, I don't know. It's just a lot of experimenting and trying things out. And originally, Barbara's story is going to be all about using this crutch that you had, to like manipulate things. We had this really cool prototype for being able to actually like play pool with the crutch. I was really impressed that we had this very novel, interesting mechanic for how you would use your two analog sticks to like move this crutch around, and you could actually like legitimately play pool. But it didn't really serve the story, and we ended up, kind of making it a very simple swing, almost like a weapon, basically. And that, it's not really the story, I guess, more like the feeling that we wanted, like knowing that this is going to be the most kind of overt, horror-y comic book, kind of Tales from the Crypt feeling story. Kind of tune the mechanics to more match that feeling. So I don't know if that long-winded answer, addresses your question or not.
I sort of just want to have a conversation with you about the game without going into spoilers, and you did it fantastically.
Oh, thanks.
But for those of you who haven't played Edith Finch and didn't understand a word of what was just said, I highly recommend that you do. And I bet Ian also does as well.
Yeah, I think if you're the kind of person that likes experiences you've never had before, I think this game has a lot to offer there. If you're the kind of person who really, just likes grueling death matches, against people from across the country, this may not be, the multiplayer game for you, since it has no multiplayer components. But for a certain, kind of gamer that digs things they've never seen before, this game has a lot.
A couple more questions. I've just got to say. I'm not going to ask you your favorite story because that would be cruel. But I am going to ask you, what's the one that you feel most proud of that you told?
Most proud of.
In terms of maybe story or a mechanic.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm really proud of the way that Gregory's story came together. Partly because that story was on the chopping block. Like 6 months before we released, our publisher was asking us to cut it because it just wasn't there. And I guess I'm not proud so much of like what I did on that. I'm really more proud of what our gameplay programmer, Evan Rogers, managed to do, because Evan was in this meeting and the publisher was like, guys, we have too many stories. We need to cut some stories. Gregory's story is the one that's like not, the least far along. And Evan Rogers is like, no, we can make this work. We spent too much time. And yeah, it's amazing how a few deft, adjustments in the way that the frog moves and the way that, everything kind of operates helped that story to coalesce into something that, went from being confusing and frustrating to, kind of joyous. And I think that story really needs to be joyous, for what else is going on in that. For like, otherwise players just have this very kind of dark takeaway from it. But, the story works, I think, because our gameplay programmer Evan Rogers, and Chris Bell and everyone else, our designer, did a really great job of tuning something in a very specific direction to match, where it needed to be. So I would say Gregory's story is what I'm most proud of.
Cool. Two very quick questions.
I'll ask. I have to ask one.
Okay. I got to get one in before you
Everyone
ask the question.
Was it?
I got to ask one question before you get in the question. How did you get Neil Druckmann to be QA?
We just asked. I think that's the one of the wondrous things about game development is that it's a really small community, and I think we asked Neil maybe like the week before or something, and Chris Bell, our designer, and I went over to Neil's house because we're all in Los Angeles, and we just stopped by one Sunday, and we brought, this is like very late in development, this is maybe in January of this year, a couple months before we're supposed to be completely done with the game, and we just brought over a PlayStation 4 development kit and hooked it up to his computer or his TV and played it in his living room. And that's something we like to do at the end of development, where we actually play with people in their houses, as opposed to having them come by the studio. And because people feel like kind of guinea pigs or lab rats when they know they're being tested. But if you're in their house, maybe if they've been drinking, ideally, there's just like a sort of more natural feeling that you get. So yeah, we just the short answer is we asked.
Nice.
All right. All right. So the question everyone has subconsciously been asking themselves: what's up with the birds? Giant Sparrow,
well, obviously,
Unfinished Swan, finches.
Yeah, it should be no secret to anyone that I really like birds. And personally, that's my spirit animal, or class of animals. And for me, the bird is among other things, it's kind of like a symbol of the presence of nature in our otherwise very civilized lives. Like, it's one of the few animals that can actually coexist with us, even though we've done our best to make the spaces that we inhabit completely uninhabitable for most animals, particularly like larger animals, things other than insects. Birds have sort of managed to live with us, and yeah, it's just amazing to me that you can look out your window and see this miraculous creature flying through the air or perched, on a tree nearby. And hopefully, our games have a similar feel of this thing that is from a different developmental, kind of timeline, and this, like, just a little snippet of wonder in an otherwise, somewhat samey environment.
All right. That is a professional answer.
Yeah, we genuinely were expecting you to go, man, they're just pretty.
Oh, I mean that too. There's something
obviously,
really compelling about them. That I don't honestly understand what it is that I find compelling, but that's something that we'll be exploring in our next game, which will also involve birds in some way, I'm sure.
All right. That kind of concludes the interview portion of the episode. Kind of get into some more of our discussion topics for the evening. Now, one of the things in particular that happened over the weekend that we kind of got some confirmation about was Wolfenstein II. People who care about that game, such as myself, being a Bethesda head. Now, Wolfenstein 2 has been confirmed that on the Xbox One X, it's going to be getting some 4K support, and it's going to be HDR as well. Now, the thing about this one that makes it interesting, though, is the past game, The New Order, was 60 FPS. And so I highly doubt they're going to move from 60 FPS to 30 FPS all of a sudden. So I guess this kind of comes into the question with mid-generation upgrades and such. The general panel here, what are your general thoughts on mid-generation upgrades? We'll start with Mike. Keeping kind of quiet.
I mean, I think the way that these new features, quote unquote, that take advantage of these mid-generation upgrades have kind of been, they're kind of like finesse consoles, in my opinion. What I would like to see, I would like to see more options going forward from developers. So an example of that, some good examples of that would be kind of like what they did with Rise of the Tomb Raider on the PS4, where you had your 4K mode, but then you had a high detail mode at 1080p, and then you had a high performance mode, which was 60 frames per second. And Horizon Zero Dawn did something similar to that. In my opinion, there's too much focus on the 4K aspect, and I would personally sacrifice that to get 60 frames per second in every game, especially if it's a first-person shooter like Wolfenstein. Like you said, the first one was 60 frames, so it's likely that Wolfenstein 2 is going to be also. But that's kind of like what I want to see more. I want to get those options. I'm not saying PC-level settings here, but just like a detail mode, a 4K mode, and a performance mode across the board is something that I would like to see. And I think it would make these consoles a little bit more worthwhile in the long run.
All right. Nick? You alive?
Yeah, sorry. I don't know, like mid-console refreshes, it always, like, I grew up in, like, you know, I started playing games in the N64 and that kind of generation era, and it just kind of fools me around with having mid-gen console refreshes, because their games are going to run different on the base models, and then you've got 3 years later, we've got these other consoles that kind of do something a little different. I'm less excited about the 4K aspects and more of what developers can do with AIs, or like other things they can do with it. Like they can make their games more immersive, they can add more details. Like there's a lot more opportunity for that with these mid-gen consoles, but everyone's focusing on the 4K aspects. I think the mid-gen refreshes are cool because by adding more RAM and etc. to consoles gives the developers more freedom if they were restricted by the power of the initial consoles. It just gives them more options. Like I don't expect every game to be 4K, and no one should expect that. But I'm really excited for what these mid-gen console refreshes could mean for games down the road. We may not see it right off the bat. It's the same thing as, like, if you look at the games that came out when Xbox 360 and PS3 first came out, and then you look at the games that came out at the end of that generation, and when you're still using the same console, but people learned how to optimize the programs and development and everything else better. I'm kind of excited to see where they take this with the mid-gen refreshes, because as you see in games like, for example, God of War, that trailer was showing on the regular PS4. So obviously they've learned to optimize the power they have within the console to a certain point. And I'm just really excited to see what developers can do with the extra power.
And it would be nice to know for each game what exactly you're going to get, because there's games that take meaningful advantage of the new hardware, and then there's games that don't do anything with it. So I think that's another frustrating point with these mid-gen consoles too, is that based on the game, you really don't know what you're going to get with each individual game.
Mm-hmm. What about you, James?
You know my position on the frame rate debate. I don't really care. As long as it sort of stays, I don't mind. And, you know, games look pretty, and some... I'm the wrong person to ask. I'm a film critic.
Oh, you're used to 24.
Yeah.
All right. So, Ian, what are your general thoughts about these mid-generation upgrades?
I mean, I think it's great that people have an opportunity to, you know, if they want, you know, get a slightly better version of, you know, what else is out there. And particularly if you've just bought a 4K television and you're looking for things, you know, to throw up on it, it's a cool option. It's, yeah, I mean, in terms of as a developer, it's a little tricky to know how much work to put into making something that, you know, only a pretty small part of your audience is going to see, and we'll see when the Xbox, you know, the new one comes out, like what that, you know, what the sales are like. Yeah, I mean, it's great when it's something that, you know, doesn't really hurt anybody. That, you know, and I think graphics are the easiest one there, where, if you have slightly better anti-aliasing or a higher frame rate or whatever, that's just it's better for those people, but doesn't make the experience worse for everyone else. In our game, actually, one of the things that we noticed that was the most significant was the faster hard drive speed. So for us, we spent a lot of time working on loading times as you're moving around the world, having things stream in. And the experience on the PS4 Pro is just a lot better there. Like, you're less likely to run into slowdowns caused by that. But it's something that I think a lot of players are not really aware of, just kind of at the sort of subconscious level of the game is slightly better.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any plans to use the Xbox One X hardware in the future?
I don't think we have development kits for it yet, so we haven't really seen, what kind of an improvement we'd see. So no plans yet, but who knows?
Right.
This further fuels my theory that the Xbox One X is not a console but a MySpace username.
Not touching that one.
Somebody's gamer tag playing Call of Duty.
There's just too many X's for me.
Oh man! All right. So the other topic for the evening before we wrap things up, over the weekend was very, very, very busy. There's a lot of stuff going on. Wimbledon, Doctor Who, Game of Thrones came back.
You kept that quiet. You forgot. You can't shut me up. We're talking about Doctor Who now.
Oh, God. Okay, I'm out.
Oh yeah.
Well, this has been episode 61 of the Multiverse show, everybody.
I'm literally going to say the Doctor is a woman now, and I think that's pretty cool. Right, I'm done. Happy? Oh no, I'm actually really good. No, genuinely, because like the whole fundamental change of Doctor Who is about to happen, because we're going to get a new Doctor and we're going to get a new companion, and there's going to be relationship changes, and also the lead writer's leaving, so there's going to be a different style to the show, and I'm very excited. It's going to be awesome. Please carry on.
So one of the other things that did happen over the weekend was actually I think it was Raleigh SuperCon was on. That's a whole other thing entirely. But one of the other things that also did happen was D23. This is Disney's convention that they do in Anaheim.
Why is it called D23?
What was it?
Why is it D23?
I don't remember. I think it's because they have 23 studios or something. It's something like that.
All right.
They treat it like their own personal convention, and they announce a bunch of different stuff. And especially since the Marvel acquisition and Star Wars, and Pixar, you got at least like 4 solid good groups. The Disney Animation. There's tons of stuff going on. Honestly, it's a fun little convention to watch if you can. But they do not stream really any of it. It is hard to get really any sort of footage from there. Now, one of the things that did come out, though, was a little video game little presentation during the same time frame. One of them was Kingdom Hearts 3. Kingdom Hearts 3 showed off this little Toy Story level and their whole world, and it's a cool little thing here and there. In particular, was they showed off, they say, coming 2018.
We've been here before.
We've seen with Kingdom Hearts in particular, and there's other games that are pretty bad offenders, but Kingdom Hearts, people have been waiting, over a decade now for this game? And they have just, the wait has been absurd. And in particular, when it comes to release dates, I think this sparked a discussion amongst, I think on Twitter over the weekend. I thought it was a pretty decent one. When it comes to release dates, what's your general philosophy regarding that? Do you want a longer release date, at least from, not release date, a longer announced to release period, or would you shoot for a shorter one? And I'm just really kind of, I'll start with James, really. Like, what do you prefer?
I mean, I think it depends on the game, or it doesn't. I don't know. It's weird because I think let's use Resident Evil 7 as a good example. So, if you really look at it, the hype for that game began with the kitchen demo. If you really want to look at it like this, so that was before PSVR was even PSVR. That was still Project Morpheus. That was E3 2015. Yeah. And so people getting interested in the idea of horror in VR. So then they secreted that, and then they announced Resident Evil 7, and with under a year, that game is out. And of course, everyone, the Duke Nukem conversation, that's always involved in delayed games that didn't fulfill their potential. The Last Guardian is another one in there. And you, Anchor, love to talk about how Bethesda have nailed it after Fallout 4. But I do so what? Remind me exactly the wording of the question.
If push came to shove, which would you prefer as a general practice? Would you lean more towards a longer announced to release time period or a shorter one?
Oh, shorter. If it was my way, I would have it, a week before a trailer comes out.
Wow, that's real short. I did not expect that short.
Oh no, I'm a big believer in secrecy and kind of things. That comes from my acting and performing background. I don't like to give anything away before a performance. I wouldn't like to give anything away before a video game comes out.
Mm-hmm. I personally kind of lean more towards especially for the bigger AAA games. I've always leaned more towards a 9-month. Because you're delivering a baby, an announcement, release. But but some of the smaller games, I think they benefit from having a longer time because you can build up hype and build up a fan base around it, as opposed to. And I use Cuphead as an example, where if Cuphead was a game that they announced like 2 months before release, most people would not know about what Cuphead is in the first place. But over the years with Microsoft's exposure with it, that's what it is. Over the years, after seeing it for so long. But now there's a fan base who are waiting for that game to come out, as opposed to people who are just going to like stumble upon it. I mean, some people are still going to stumble upon it, but still. But Mike, what do you say on this? What do you think?
See, the thing with this, I'm going to use our Cuphead example. I agree with you when you say if you have a longer window, like with Cuphead, it gives a developer and a publisher time to drum up hype, which is great. And like you said, people would have no idea what Cuphead is, but eventually you reach a point where it's like, all right, I want to play this. When's this game coming out already? You know what I mean? So I would go for a shorter window if at all possible. Really less, a year or less. I think no more than a year from announced to when the game releases, I think is adequate.
Mm-hmm. What are you, Nick?
Well, see, I'm a fan of Square Enix games, so I'm constantly used to waiting 5 to 10 years for the games to come out. But
see, this is crazy because Square Enix were never like this. If you look at the games that they released, there was a full Final Fantasy game in 97, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, and 2002. A full 60, 70-hour JRPG.
But see, the thing is with Final Fantasy, like with Square Enix in particular, because they are one of the worst offenders, is they can sit there and they can develop a game for that prolonged period of time, and the game will still sell insanely well. Then I believe Final Fantasy 15 did almost 5 million in the first week. That game flew off the shelf.
Multi-platform.
What's that, sorry?
I think that's partly done because it was multi-platform and they launched on every console.
It was. I'm almost 100% sure it was 5 million on PS4, and then it was under 1 million on Xbox, and then they're not on PC yet. I don't think Final Fantasy 15 is not on PC yet. But me personally, I don't have a problem because games development takes a while, and if you're starting up a new IP, in order to generate hype, you need to announce it. You can't launch a new IP and then say, here's the game trailer, and then 3 months later drop the game. That's not really a good way to drum up hype for a game, in my opinion. I'm not a games developer, so I can't really comment on that. But I really think that a year to 2 years isn't that bad. Like, say, if you debut a game trailer or you show footage, like in-engine footage at E3 2015, you have a full game trailer in 2016, and the game launches late 2016, that's not unreasonable at all. I don't fault, like, some games hit hiccups in development, whether it's licensing or anything else. Like with Kingdom of Hearts, for example, I think honestly all it is that Disney keeps adding in more levels, because they've picked up, since Kingdom of Hearts 3 has been developed, they've picked up a lot more studios and everything else. Like, obviously they're going to take advantage of owning Star Wars. They're going to take advantage of the Marvel universe eventually, I imagine. So things like that probably added a few sticks into the wheel, but I don't think the development cycle should take that long, but there should be a good happy medium between those kind of dates. That's just my opinion, though.
Mm-hmm. All right, Ian, so what's your general philosophy when it comes to the announced to release window? Ideally.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would opt for, announcing a game whenever it makes sense, when, enough of it is coalesced that people would look at it and be excited and remember it. And I think Cuphead's a great example of a game that, benefited from being announced early. But then, I think the last part of it, benefits from being really short, like maybe 9 months, maybe even shorter, where you kind of know when the game is about to come out. Because I think the thing that's really frustrating as a player is the broken promises side of this. Like, if people just say, hey, this is when the game is coming out, and then they deliver on that, I don't think anyone's going to be mad about it. But, because the window is so large now, it's just very hard to predict with games when they're going to come out. But, if it was up to me, I would say, like, announce whenever you're ready to, but then don't keep talking about the game, with the date in mind until you actually have, like, a pretty solid idea of when that's going to be.
Mm-hmm. So it's a very pragmatic point of view regarding it. It really kind of depends on the situation.
Yeah, and I just don't need to hear about every game that's in development, over the 5 years of the development. It's like, it's enough to know, oh yeah, like that game company is working on a new game. Cool, I will pay attention to that. But I feel like there's just a really long hype cycle these days for games where there's really not that much to talk about. It's just kind of rehashing the same thing. And personally, I just rather if there's like a burst at the beginning and then a burst at the end, and less chatter in the middle of the cycle.
So kind of like what CD Projekt Red is doing with Cyberpunk 2077. Like, they announced it. Here's a cool little cinematic trailer. Since then, here or there, but that's kind of it.
Yeah, and I think
not doing anything else.
I mean, it does help a lot on the developer side, just because your team, right, is working on this thing. They've been working on it for years. Nobody's heard about it. It can get a little grueling. It's nice to give your team a moment to hear all of the great things that people from the outside world have to say about it, because you've just got this echo chamber of what you and your team are talking about. But yeah, I think beyond the announce, there could be like a dark period for quite a while, and as a player, I wouldn't mind.
Mm-hmm. All right. I mean, because because here as a consumer, it's really kind of we kind of get like suckered in a lot when it comes to the cycle. Like I think one really bad abuse I remember was the Division.
Mm-hmm.
They anticipated that game was coming out like in 2014, and like they were pumping out all this stuff. You heard about it for like a good maybe 2 years, a year and a half, and then it was constant. When it got delayed, everyone just shut down. Nobody talked about it until release. It was like, oh, there goes the hype. All right.
But then you have Uncharted, where every time it got delayed, the hype grew.
I think it depends on your franchise a lot, though, because with the Uncharted series, that was a highly, highly anticipated game. And the one thing was particularly Naughty Dog Studio, they built a really, really good reputation on delivering on promises. They may not be the best on time constraints, but when they deliver you a product, Naughty Dog has a very, very good reputation of delivering a highly polished product.
Well, when they've got developers just coming around to their houses with games, who can blame them?
Yeah, sorry for my part in delaying The Last of Us 2.
Wait! Are you confirmed? Did you confirm that?
No, they've announced there's another Last of Us.
I know, but you've confirmed that you've delayed it.
Oh, no, I think it doesn't need any help from me.
See, I can't wait until years go by and we're talking in retrospect talking about The Last of Us 2, and they go, "Man, it was great." But when that swan turned up, it was just that was just a weird section.
All right. Anyway, this has been great. I thank you, Ian, again for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, anytime you want to come on, you are more than welcome to just hit us up.
And if you ever come to London, if you ever come to London, please come to the loading bar, the gaming bar where all the journalists come.
Oh, okay.
There is a Deus Ex on the beach with your name on it.
All right. If I'm in London or England at all, I will let you know.
All right. Anyway, guys, time for our outros here. We can find everybody. Also, remember, for those of you watching, we are doing Gamer Meetup this weekend in North Carolina. If you're in that general area, you're more than welcome to come. We got a couple special surprise people coming by. I'll let you know about that if you want to RSVP. You guys can find me on Anchorman V2. You guys, every platform in existence. Same thing across the board. But all right, time for outros real quick. Nick?
Oh, thanks for having me on the show again. It's always great to do the show on the Mondays. And keep an eye out this week on my channel. My What Remains of Edith Finch review for Xbox will be up on Friday once I get my hands on that. And yeah, so that's everything for me.
All right, Mike.
All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Multiverse Show. This is Mike from the Inner Circle. Again, TICGN.com. You can find me on Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, Twitter, YouTube, wherever, at Mike P. The Truth.
And James?
At James_S. Wilson, if you want to come and talk to me on Twitter about anything to do with Radiohead or anything to do with how I look like Ed Sheeran and how I was amazing in Game of Thrones last night. And also, thank you very much to Ian for coming on.
Oh, thank you.
All right, Ian, and where can the people find you?
We're on Twitter at Giant Sparrow, and you can also find our website at www.giantsparrow.com.
And what comes out tomorrow?
Nope, Wednesday. Well, tomorrow
Wednesday.
for you,
it's tomorrow for me.
It's tomorrow for him. Yeah, go with that.
It's Tuesday right now.
What Remains of Edith Finch for Xbox.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, anyway, guys, thank you guys for showing up to the show, the Multiverse Show, episode 61. It's been a great show. I really do appreciate everybody showing up again. Anyway, guys, this is the Multiverse Show, the greatest show on Mondays, and we will see you guys later.
Yeah,